Okay, can remote participants see the screen? You can. Okay, thanks, Brother John. Okay. Good evening, brothers and guests. I'm excited to be giving this presentation today. Originally, the slide deck was made for a York Rite presentation, and it's been adapted to not reveal specific York Rite teaching surrounding the 12 tribes, and instead will focus on the biblical teaching. In order to properly understand the symbolism of the 12 tribes of Israel, it's important to first understand the biblical narrative of the origin of the 12 tribes, beginning with the Bible's historical account of the patriarchs and matriarchs of Israel. We'll review the origins of the first patriarch, Abraham, with an anthropological lens that will help us appreciate the biblical narrative as relatable history. This, in turn, will help us understand the world that the 12 tribes of Israel were formed in, and discuss recent archaeological evidence supporting their presence in ancient Egypt and the Levant. We will juxtapose the heraldic symbols used by the tribes to identify themselves with the roles that the tribes held within the greater nation of Israel, the fascinating connection the Bible makes between the tribes' roles, and sublime spiritual lessons to be learned and appreciated by all mankind. Abraham was born in the ancient city of Ur, a major city in one of the world's first civilizations, Mesopotamia, approximately 2,000 years before the Common Era. For context on how old that is, Mesopotamia is credited with the greatest technological innovation of its time, the wheel. The Bible recounts that God revealed himself to Abraham and commanded him and his wife Sarah to depart Ur with all of their possessions and head west to the land of Canaan, where Abraham would establish an inheritance for his descendants. Again, for context, this would have been very much like the American pioneers of the 1800s, leaving the major cities of the East Coast, New York and Boston, to travel to the western frontiers of the North American continent. The Bible doesn't explain why God revealed himself to Abraham, but Jewish tradition teaches that Abraham's careful observation of the working of the cosmos and the earth itself led him to believe of his own accord that there could be only one creator and that the polytheistic society of Ur had it all wrong. An often overlooked aspect of who Abraham was is the immense wealth and power he possessed. But an incident in the Bible gives us a hint through the story of the war between 9 Canaanite kings that resulted in Abraham's nephew Lot being captured and taken prisoner during the Battle of Siddim. When word reached Abraham, he was able to muster his own fighting force and lead them into battle against a group of 4 foreign kings who were invading 5 city-states in Canaan. Abraham's intervention not only resulted in the successful rescue of Lot, but it turned the tide of the war in favor of the 5 native kings of the region. Abraham's adventures in Canaan aside, the Bible tells us the purpose of his emigration was to establish an inheritance in the land that would become the territory of his descendants. According to the Bible, Abraham fathered children in his very old age, first Ishmael, born to Sarah's maidservant Hagar, and his second son Isaac, born to Sarah herself. The Bible also recounts many sons born to Abraham by his third wife Keturah after Sarah died. Isaac, by virtue of being the oldest legitimate son of Abraham, is considered the firstborn and heir. As such, Abraham's priority for Isaac was finding him a wife that he too may father children and secure God's promise of Abraham's descendants becoming a great nation. Abraham, not thinking fondly of the local Canaanite women, sent his servant Eliezer back to the land of Ur to find a wife for Isaac. There, Eliezer asks for a sign that the woman who would offer him water and water to his camels would be God's intended wife for Isaac. Eliezer's prayer is quickly answered with Rebekah. Arrangements were quickly made for Rebekah to return with Eliezer and wed Isaac. To Isaac and Rebekah were born twin sons, the older Esau and the younger Jacob. The Bible recounts the bitter rivalry between the brothers, epitomized in an incident where Jacob sells his starving brother soup in exchange for the firstborn's birthright. This rivalry eventually culminated with Jacob having to flee the land of Canaan upon Isaac's death in order to avoid being killed by Esau. He makes his way to the land of Haran, where his uncle Laban lived. There, Jacob worked for Laban for 14 years in exchange for marrying Laban's two daughters, Leah and Rachel. There in Haran, Jacob fathered children through his two wives, and also through the maidservants of each of his wives, Zilpah and Bilhah. The sons born to Jacob would become the forebears of the 12 tribes of Israel. After establishing his family in Haran and amassing wealth for himself, Jacob departed with plans to return to Canaan. On his way there, he sent messengers ahead of him to inform Esau of his return. The messengers returned with news that Esau was coming to meet him, accompanied by a large group of men, and Jacob feared what he might be facing. On the night before the fated meeting with Esau, the Bible tells us that Jacob was confronted by an angel who fought with him, but Jacob prevailed. As a reward for his victory, Jacob demands a blessing from the angel, who in turn blesses him with the name Yisrael, which means in Hebrew, he who has struggled with the divine, due to Jacob's continued prevailing over the odds in his life. The next day, Jacob's meeting with Esau was peaceful and reconciliatory, and Jacob proceeded to the land of Canaan, later known as the land of Israel, with his family. And so it is that the Israelite branch of Abraham's descendants began to grow into a large clan. 12 sons and 1 daughter were born to Jacob through 4 mothers. The most favored of Israel's sons was Joseph, the oldest son of Rachel. The favoritism on Jacob's part for Joseph led to extreme jealousy with the other brothers, who plotted to kill him, but instead sold him into slavery while lying to Jacob, informing him that Joseph had been killed. Joseph ended up in Egypt, where by God's good grace, Joseph managed to rise in Egyptian society from slave to the second in command to Pharaoh in Egypt. The middle picture shown here is a still image from the documentary Patterns of Evidence. It shows an empty sarcophagus that was found in an area of Egypt where a Semitic people once lived, likely the Hebrews themselves. The appearance of the sarcophagus is different from most, in that the person who was buried there was not Egyptian in appearance and is depicted as wearing a coat of many colors. Meanwhile, in Canaan, famine strikes the land, and Jacob sends his sons down to Egypt to buy food. To make a very long story short, Joseph and his brothers are reunited, with Joseph forgiving them wholeheartedly due to his faith that everything that had transpired was so that he could provide food for his family, and indeed for the world, as Joseph was a skilled administrator. Joseph instructed his brothers to bring his father down to Egypt, for many more years of famine were anticipated. With the entire Israelite clan provided for under Joseph's leadership, the groundwork is set for Israel to become a nation. In an ironic sign of further favoritism, Jacob adopted Joseph's 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, as his own sons, giving those 2 grandchildren equal status with their uncles and their descendants equal status as half-tribes in the nation of Israel. Joseph's 2 sons, each establishing equal tribes of their own, is an important fact to remember as we continue this lecture. Jacob died in Egypt and blessed his sons, a blessing which contained imagery that would lead to the tribal symbolism we are familiar with from the Bible. The tribe of Dan was likened to a snake who bites his enemies along the way. The tribe of Reuben was cursed and likened to turbulent waters due to an episode in the Bible in which Reuben disrespected his father Jacob. Similarly, the tribes of Simon and Levi were cursed that their descendants would be scattered among Israel due to a situation in which they took vengeance against an entire city for the rape of their sister Dania. Despite the noble intent, the prospect of war was something that Jacob couldn't bear, given his already very stressful life. The tribe of Joseph was likened to a sheaf of wheat due to his bountiful success in life against all odds. But later, the fully formed tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh were blessed by Moses to resemble a bull, as they were large and strong tribes. The tribe of Judah was blessed with royalty and likened to a lion. Judah was the 4th oldest son, but with Reuben, Simon, and Levi all falling out of favor with Jacob, the firstborn's blessing went to Judah, whose descendants, the kings David and Solomon, would one day rule over all the tribes of Israel. All of the tribal heads were assigned a symbol to represent their identity, but these 4 tribes held special positions of leadership within the nation of Israel. The 12 tribes of Israel flourished in Egypt in the district of Goshen, where they left behind traces of their presence. Here we see a cylinder seal impression found in the ruins of the Middle Bronze Age palace at Tel Ed-Daba, dated to what some understand to be the early Israelite period. We see symbolism here that could be referring to some of the tribes: a bull for Joseph, a snake for Dan, a lion for Judah, a ship for Zebulun, and the swirling waters of Reuben. Archaeological discoveries in the area of Goshen show what appear to be 12 tombs. The large pyramid tomb is where the sarcophagus of the individual with the multicolored coat was buried. Notice how it is the most important one, and one can't help but speculate that it must have been Joseph's. The image is on display at the Austrian Archaeological Institute. As the Bible recounts, the Israelites' situation in Egypt did not remain favorable. They multiplied greatly, were seen as a threat, and then enslaved. 430 years after Joseph arrived in Egypt, the Bible recounts a series of miraculous events that redeemed the 12 tribes from slavery. As the Israelites made their way to the land their tradition taught them they would one day inherit, they made a pit stop at Mount Sinai, who some researchers theorize is located in Saudi Arabia, shown here. There, they received through the hand of Moses 10 laws, which were the ethical underpinning of the entire Torah law. 613 commandments consisting of ritual, civil, criminal, and even financial laws found in the 5 books of Moses: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. These laws formed the constitution of the new free nation of Israel. After 40 years in the desert, the Israelites finally settled in the land of Canaan and established their tribal allotments of land as shown here, according to the book of Joshua. Notice that the tribe of Simon is completely engulfed within Judah's territory. Also notice that there is no allotment for the tribe of Levi. As Levi was the tribe of priests and received tithes of all livestock and produce of Israel in perpetuity, they were not granted land and instead lived in special cities. The territorial circumstances of those 2 tribes fulfilled Jacob's curse that Simon and Levi would be scattered in Israel, although through 2 very different means. Prior to the conquest of the land of Canaan, the Israelites wandered in the Sinai desert for 40 years. During this time, their place of worship was a mobile shrine called the Mishkan, tabernacle in English. The tabernacle was constructed in the desert, where, according to the Bible, God communicated to Moses the manner in which it should be built. In addition to instructing the Israelites on the precise materials and design of the tabernacle, God also prescribed the way the tribes should encamp around the tabernacle. The Levites were tasked with assembling and disassembling the tabernacle, and as such, would encamp and march at the center of the nation where the tabernacle was situated. The rest of the nation was split into 4 divisions, consisting of 3 tribes each, and led by 1 principal tribe within the group. The northern division was led by Dan and accompanied by Naphtali and Asher. The southern division was led by Reuben and accompanied by Simon and Gad. The western division was led by Ephraim, of the half-tribe of Joseph, and accompanied by Manasseh and Benjamin. The eastern division was led by Judah and accompanied by Issachar and Zebulun. The tabernacle served as the primary place of Jewish worship for 440 years. After the conquest of the land of Canaan, the tabernacle ceased to be mobile and was situated in the city of Shiloh within the territory of the tribe of Ephraim. During the reign of King Solomon, however, a temple was built that superseded the tabernacle. King Solomon's temple served as the primary Israelite sanctuary from the year 957 BCE to 587 BCE, at which time it was destroyed by the Babylonians. It was later rebuilt in the year 516 BCE when King Cyrus of Persia defeated the Babylonians and permitted the Jews to return to Israel and rebuild the temple. Nearly 1,000 years after the Exodus from Egypt, while in Babylonian captivity, a man from the tribe of Levi, Ezekiel, experienced a vision from God. In the vision, he saw a 4-faced angel with the face of an eagle, the face of a man, the face of a bull, and the face of a lion. This vision is regarded as one of the most mystical passages of the Hebrew Scriptures, and its study gave birth to the Kabbalistic tradition, also known as Merkabah mysticism. The lesson behind the vision is believed to represent how one may progress spiritually closer to God. and each face represents the tribes of Dan, Reuben, Ephraim, and Judah. The tradition that the faces of the angels in Ezekiel's vision represent the 4 tribal division leaders is problematic, as the Bible does not mention either an eagle or a man representing any of the tribes. Jewish tradition teaches, however, that each of the 12 tribes corresponds to a zodiac sign. This tradition gives a key to unlock part of the meaning of the vision. The tribe of Dan corresponds to the sign of Scorpio. The connection makes sense, as both scorpions and snakes are venomous creatures. Interestingly, the sign of Scorpio is known to be the most judgmental sign of the zodiac, and the word Dan in Hebrew means judge. In fact, the tribe of Dan was known to be the tribe in Israel that produced the most judges. Advanced students of astrology know, however, that the sign of Scorpio has an additional animal symbol, an eagle. This is because the elevated, more mature Scorpio judges with a bird's eye view, with the elevated perspective of an eagle, enabling him to judge mercifully and correctly. Thus, a lesson we can learn from the symbolism of the tribe of Dan is the importance of judging the world around us and each other objectively and favorably, seeing the big picture rather than judging others as quickly as a scorpion or a snake stings. The tribe of Reuben descends from Jacob's firstborn son, known for an incident in which he disrespected his father. We learn in Genesis that upon discovering that Jacob placed his bed in the tent of one of the maidservants, as opposed to the tent of his mother Leah, Reuben took it upon himself to move the bed without Jacob's permission to the tent of Leah. While we can sympathize with this emotional response of a son defending his mother's honor, this was not a wise or mature way to act. The turbulent waters that symbolize Reuben are elevated in the sign of Aquarius, symbolized by a man pouring and controlling that flow of water. From this symbolism of the tribe of Reuben, we learn that rather than being like turbulent wind, which makes waves on the surface of the water, we should control our emotions and behave appropriately however we might feel. Jacob likened his son Joseph to a sheaf of wheat, but later in the Bible, Moses ascribed the symbol of the bull to Joseph. And so naturally, Joseph corresponds to the sign of Taurus. The sign of Taurus is an earth sign, and the 2 tribes together, of Ephraim and Manasseh, occupied the most territory in the land of Israel. Furthermore, Jacob's chosen symbol for Joseph was a sheaf of wheat, symbolizing the abundant produce of the earth, which in ancient times was plowed by oxen. From this, we can learn that an important component of leadership is working hard to produce for oneself and others. The tribe of Judah was Israel's foremost tribe. Jacob's blessing for Judah was that the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet. And indeed, the kings David and Solomon were direct descendants of Judah, as have been many leading Jewish rabbinic leaders. The lion of the tribe of Judah is representative of royalty and leadership, and corresponds to the sign of Leo. In fact, every zodiac sign corresponds to a body in the solar system as well, and Leo corresponds to the sun, the solar system's most prominent body. Leos are known to be very confident and expressive, a quality that is needed for strong leadership. But without the mastery of the lessons of the previous tribes, this kind of energy can be dangerous. The lesson of the lion's face being incorporated into Ezekiel's vision of the multifaceted angel is that a leader must be courageous, strong, and outspoken, but only one who has learned to judge appropriately, control his emotions, and work for the sake of others should be promoted to a position of leadership. Interestingly, as we progress through the tribes of Dan through Judah, the need to reconcile the multifaceted angel's correlation with the tribal division leaders is needed less and less. The eagle corresponding to Dan seems to completely contradict the Bible, and we need astrology's help to explain the connection between snake, scorpion, and eagle. With the tribe of Reuben, astrology's help is needed again, although the constellation of Aquarius is visibly both water and man, so the connection is more obvious. With the tribe of Joseph, there is no contradiction, as the Bible does attribute the bull to Joseph, but only later through Moses' blessing as opposed to Jacob's blessing. The tribe of Judah is the only tribe whose symbolism has remained constant for that tribe since the time of Jacob's blessing. From this, we can learn that as we each progress through our own paths of leadership, it becomes easier to reveal our inner lions, but only after having first passed through the stages of Dan, Reuben, and Joseph. As mentioned earlier, this slide deck was originally created for a presentation to Fort Lauderdale York Rite and was adapted for this open Blue Lodge meeting. The 4 tribal division leaders have a very special significance within the York Rite tradition, but as I was working on this adapted slide deck, it occurred to me that within Blue Lodge, there are lessons that could be applied to the 4 senior officers of the Lodge. The tribe of Dan's symbolism correlates well with the senior deacon's duties. The tribe of Reuben's symbolism correlates well with the junior warden's duties. The tribe of Joseph's symbolism correlates well with the senior warden's duties, and the tribe of Judah's symbolism correlates well with the worshipful master's duties. In conclusion, there are many lessons to be learned from the history of the tribes, their roles within the nation of Israel, and the attribution of symbols as we understand them with the help of Ezekiel's vision. Abraham, the founder of the nation of Israel, advanced theology in his time from mere deity worship to a pondering of the source of the universe itself. He passed this legacy to his descendants, the 12 tribes of Israel, whose existence corroborates the narrative of the Bible through archaeological evidence and the continued existence of the Jewish nation and the Judeo-Christian religions today. The fascinating construct of the nation of Israel, consisting of 12 tribes corresponding to 12 signs of the zodiac, with 4 tribal division leaders corresponding to the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac, serves as a testament to not only the profound ingenuity of the Bible, but the uncanny reality of metaphysical concepts revealed in the physical world. To this very day, we can turn to the Bible and learn from this how to apply these lessons ourselves, lessons which are of particular importance for members of the Masonic fraternity, whose governance hierarchy is couched in the moral lessons of each position, which we, as Masons, must take seriously in order to do our part to make the world a better place. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Really good. Does anyone have any questions to offer? I would like to start by asking, again, just to put us ourselves into context. There were 12 tribes and these 4 were leaders. So my question is, in what sense they were leaders in that period of time?
Sure. So the reason for their leadership is not clear, but they were marked for leadership in the sense of the divisions of encampment around the tabernacle. So the tabernacle's in the middle, that's the place of worship. Immediately around the tabernacle is where the Levites encamped. And these are Levite subclans. So the tribes also had smaller clans within, the Merarites, Gershonites, and Kohathites, encamped immediately around with Moses and Aaron on the east side. The east side is the most prominent direction in the Jewish religion. And then in the east, you see this perimeter is led by the tribe of Judah. So these divisions, east, north, west, and south, were led by these division leaders. Each division would march in a column and they would move the tabernacle, with the ones in blue leading that column. And encamping around the tabernacle would have been important because they were wandering through the wilderness amidst many nations, and protecting the tabernacle from attack would have been required. And so this was really a military structure, right? It was a military formation to protect the tabernacle with the non-religious tribes on the outside, and then in the immediate interior, the Levite tribes guarding the tabernacle. But these were the leaders of each division.
Now, since each leader is one of the elements, water, air, earth, and fire, those on the south are 3. I mean, let's stick to the east, where is fire. Are those 3 also fire there that are together with them?
No. So Judah's fire. So in the zodiac, there's 12 zodiac signs.
Yes.
But they're also split into 4 groups: fixed signs, mutable signs, and fixed, mutable, and because I'm one.
Stubborn. Sorry.
It is related to that, actually. It has to do with direction. Aries and Capricorn. So there's different divisions. So Judah, Dan, Ephraim, and Reuben are the mutable signs, I believe. And Judah's fire, Dan is water, Ephraim is earth, and Reuben is air. So my guess would be each division is definitely a mix. Just
Yeah, so I mean, what's on whatever yellow and green are not on the east side are not obligatory also fire.
they're not fire, no.
Makes it complicated. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we all have to get along. Right?
Okay.
The questions?
Brother, hey, I don't know if I heard it right, but you say Mount Sinai in Arabic, it's in Israel. Mount Sinai.
No. I mean, they were on their way to Israel when they left Egypt. They had to stop at Mount Sinai first. And there's two theories of where it could be. For a very long time, it was thought to be in the Sinai Desert outside of Egypt. But there's tradition among various Arab tribes in Saudi Arabia that there's a mountain there that is the Mount Sinai, and they have found traces of there having been an encampment there. So now the newest theory is, and there's more evidence supporting it, that it's in Saudi Arabia. Sure.
Although it made less sense because Saudi Arabia is far south. So if they came from Egypt to Israel, it makes a lot of sense that Mount Sinai is the desert of Sinai, because that's the way.
There's another theory with regards to where they crossed. So it used to be thought that they crossed in a very northern part of the Nile.
Okay.
There's a new theory that suggests that they actually crossed a marshy area that's more in the south of the Nile. And if they would have crossed there, which would have been easier, actually, if they crossed there, they would have actually entered Saudi Arabia. And the Bible does say that they went in a big circle. They didn't go straight. 40 years, they went round about.
A good question. This structure, the military structure they have, you show this was presented in the first temple, and before also during the 40 years when they stopped, they did the same structure.
This applied specifically during the 40 years is when they had this structure. Then when they settled in the land of Israel, the tabernacle was put in a particular city, and then these tribes all went to their territories. So this was for 40 years, they had this traveling, basically military division structure to guard the tabernacle. Questions?
So from them, who began the Kabbalah tradition from those tribes?
Oh, Kabbalah tradition came much
Yeah,
later.
but you mentioned some point that
Yeah,
one of the tribes were related to Kabbalah.
so Ezekiel's vision is the source from the Bible, that the study of these passages is what created the mystical tradition because of everything that's in there. The four-faced angels, these are concepts and images that are very difficult to even understand, and the Bible doesn't tell you what it means even. So in the study of these chapters, it began the mystical tradition, but that happened probably in the Middle Ages, actually.
1800s.
Before, actually, even in Spain, actually, a few centuries before. Any questions?
No, can I still?
Please, go ahead.
So the first temple, you mentioned city, I forgot the name.
The first temple was in Jerusalem.
No, but you mentioned another city when
Oh, Shiloh.
Yeah, and where is that located?
In northern Israel today, it would be the northern part of Israel close to Lebanon.
And why did you move
To Jerusalem?
Yes.
Politics, if you ask me, right? So King David made his capital Jerusalem. When King David made his capital Jerusalem, his son, King Solomon, who was inspired to build a sanctuary, built it in Jerusalem because it was the nation's capital. So there it became the primary place of worship. There was even a situation in the Bible where the tribe of Judah and many of the tribes took offense to the fact that the northern tribes still had the tabernacle. It was kind of a political issue, but the northern tribes responded saying, you know, why should our children and children's children think that we too don't care about God, that we too can't have a temple, because Jerusalem was very far for them. So, but eventually the tabernacle was destroyed by the Philistines.
The image in the bottom right corner there,
Mhm.
what is that?
So if you ask ancient alien theorists,
Very good.
right? So it's you know that the Bible says that one of the beings that was floating around in Ezekiel's vision was a wheel within a wheel, and so that's one of the visions that's like studied deeply too. I mean, we covered the angel today pretty much in depth, but there's also a hand with a scroll coming out. There was this wheel within a wheel, which who knows if it actually looked like that. There are people who theorize it really was a UFO. I don't know what it actually was.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see many creatures, like in Egypt and many others, that use the face of the eagle, bull, as a man. It's interesting. I love this.
Brother, what would be the connection with the disappearance of the 10 tribes?
Well, you know, there is a connection to this actually, because the reason that the northern 10 tribes were exiled was due to civil war in Israel, right? And so after King Solomon died, there was a power vacuum in leadership, and there was an immediate civil war with the 10 northern tribes separating. It was actually not entirely the 10 northern tribes. The southern kingdom of Judah consisted of Judah, Benjamin. There were obviously some Levites because they were scattered everywhere, and the tribe of Simon, which was engulfed within Judah. But there was political division. And, you know, it does tie directly connected to this, because you need strong leadership to maintain a nation. And then, you know, as Masons, you know, we should, peace and harmony should prevail, right? So I think there's a lesson there in terms of unity, strength of leadership, and, you know, the prioritizing peace among brothers, which was a problem since before they became tribes. Right? So it's a problem today.
One question. It is known that the New Testament has been changed, especially in the Middle Ages. Has something like this happened to the Old Testament? Or can we consider that what we read today is the original source of it?
That's a question for a real expert, not for me. What I will say this is that the first 5 books of the Old Testament, which are Torah, right? The tradition for maintaining that is that it must be handwritten by a Jewish scribe and handwritten while looking at another Torah. So it has to be handwritten, copied from another. They have found Torah scrolls that have been lost, and they're hundreds of years. I think the oldest one is almost 1,000 years old, still existing. And they don't really find differences. There are sometimes differences in the spelling of a word, using one Hebrew letter instead of another Hebrew letter, but no changes in the actual word itself, at least for the 5 books. Now, for the other parts of the Old Testament, I think it's hard to say. You had a question.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to note that of all the tribes, 3 still remain, because we identify the 3 tribes now are from that area. Still identify, and the
Yes.
Jews identify the 3 tribes, which are Levi,
Yehuda and the Kohanim.
Kohen, and Israel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting, why would they still identify the 3 tribes? The others were dispersed.
So it's because, you know, so the Levites were scattered everywhere. So it was easier for them to remain. They were in every single territory. And there had to be a tradition passed from father to son in order to be a Levite. You couldn't just claim to be one, you had to have that tradition. The Kohanim, which you referred to, the priests, were actually a clan of the Levites. So they were part of it, so they obviously remained. The tribe of Judah was the southern tribe. They were the more religious tribe. They didn't get into the idol worship that the northern tribes eventually copied the religions of other nations. The tribe of Judah, not so much. So that's why. And then you mentioned Israel. That just refers to anyone from any tribe.
Thank you.
I think next was someone over here.
Actually, this is more of a response. The question on the translations of the Old Testament. There is a interesting book, probably biased, but a book called What God Spoke in Greek. And basically it talks about the translation called the Septuagint, where the Old Testament was translated into Greek because Greek was the common language in that region, as opposed to Latin or others, when it was, especially Roman control. Greek was the language of the intellectuals and religions. So I don't remember the exact history of who authorized it, but supposedly someone came and authorized the translation from Hebrew into Greek. And it's called Septuagint because there were 72 scholars, one from a test, 12 from each tribe, or the 6 from each tribe, whatever the number was. 6 from each tribe to actually do the translation. They all had to agree on the translation. And when you look at the New Testament, when it refers to Old Testament, it's actually referring to the Septuagint, not the Hebrew, because there are differences. The current Hebrew is the Masoretic text, which was from the 1100s. The interesting thing is the scrolls that were found in the Dead Sea, when they actually do the comparisons to the Dead Sea scrolls of the early Hebrew text, they translate and match the Septuagint better than they match the Masoretic text. So there are differences between the Dead Sea Scrolls and the current Masoretic. And it's interesting to see what those differences are, and the fact that now we have a third-party translation, so to speak, that supposedly was authorized, that actually corroborates the Dead Sea version. Interesting to go back and read. And there is that one book called The Gospel of Greek that really details the differences. It's pretty interesting reading.
I think it's biased.
It matches the Dead Sea Scrolls. You've got that bias.
There was another.
So, and the people in Ethiopia, what tribe out there?
There's one group there that has a tradition of being from the tribe of Dan. And there's another group there that has a tribe of being from the tribe of Levi, specifically Kohens, so the descendants of Aaron specifically. And they actually did a DNA test in that group, and they matched people that are Kohanim even from Russia. So it would seem to be accurate. And they look pure African, but they seem to have an Israelite ancestry that goes back.
Oh, so the nine of the north. The 9 of the north. So if they disperse, what they became non-Jewish?
For the most part, there's a group in India called Bnei Menashe that they seem to come from that tribe. They actually have a Jewish tradition, right? So there's that group. I know that there's a group in Pakistan that some people think, so they're kind of around, but they didn't really maintain a very noticeable Jewish identity. Okay. I just like this answer.
So, perfect slide. There is a correlation for the 12 tribes with the 12 sites. And we have 4 that you mentioned that they are actually the ones that display the leadership. Is there any hope for the rest of us? And maybe what I'm going through is, I believe, or everyone can just take these lessons and apply to themselves to go through life and be able not just be leaders, but just grow within their beliefs and move forward. Have the commitment.
I think that, it's hard to say. So first of all, I don't think that leadership qualities are limited to these, signs or these tribes or anything like that. I think, the Bible has to communicate in ways that makes people think and understand. And so these tribes were selected for a purpose that was probably originally political, but then, God chose to reveal a certain message to Ezekiel, correlating a message here for us to decipher and understand and think I do think that that the message is a progressive one, and this is my own take, right? The progression of the leadership skills through each tribe is my own take, but I think it is important, right? I think this gives us a formula for developing as leaders because, you know, if you think about the tribe of Judah and being like a lion and being confident, if you jump straight to that, you know, everybody's had a terrible boss, right? Who's, you know, maybe a little too arrogant, full of himself, whatever it may be. That's usually indicative of someone who jumps to the finish line without really developing themselves to develop the proper qualities. And when you look at this formula, you start to think, well, you know, the first step is really being able to see things how they are, right? And the second step is once you can see things how they are, you don't want to react to everything you see. So you got to be in control of your emotions. And once you do those two things, those are more internal. Then you can move to the external, which is before you jump in the captain's chair, you got to be willing to work for others and actually put the effort in. And then lastly, once you've got all that, then you're in a good position to actually lead and be in charge. So I think it's a formula for success. I think at the end it comes down to a practical lesson that can apply to anyone.
For those who don't really know too much about Masonry, we actually are based on the teachings of the construction of King Solomon's Temple, and it's we are seeing that all the teachings that this Israel and the Israelites have through their journey can be seen and applied at the launch. I just want to throw a question out there to probably to actually to brothers. What do you see best applied to your lives as Masons that can correlate with the presentation? Does anyone has any answer to that for those that are Masons? Walter? Well, I see this slide and it's actually showing a lot of things that we are teaching in Masonry and a lot of things that I believe we need to understand as Masons. To actually be the leader of the lodge, you have to go through the process of what we do normally 7 years, going from one chair to the other. And I remember, I think it was on Gary's installation, probably 6-7 years ago, that he mentioned that every person that sits on a chair takes some learnings from the previous person that was sitting on the chair, and it actually acts as a person, as a teacher to the next one or to the chair below. So to my brothers, I believe that everyone should take this into account and take yourselves as the teachers and actually the students for these lessons. Go back to your, for the one that's behind you in the transition chairs and help them out going through this process. And look up to the one that just went through these chairs and go ahead and ask questions and learn from them. So I believe this is my take on in the sense of Masonry being applied, or this presentation being applied to Masonry. I think you have a question.
Absolutely. So, with my experience, very similar to what happened with the tribes, and kind of correlating with Masonry, as they traveled together through many areas, they went with a common belief and a common cause, or not cause, excuse me, but for harmony and going for the same goal. Similar with us, we gather around in a lodge like this with brothers of many personalities, different characters and such, but we learn how to get along. We learn how to have harmony and to better each other. Now, as Worshipful Officer said,
everything you see that's in this lodge, every seat has a specific symbol, a specific working tool, if you will. And when you can actually learn what that tool represents and what it means, and you can change it from what the object is into more of an esoteric or, how would I say, theoretical belief in what it represents. For example, if you look at that wall over there in the middle above the chair, that's a symbol that's very important for me. There's several meanings there. And when you can take symbols like that and constantly have it in your head, when certain situations arise and some things can really get the best of you, you kind of, when you live in what we teach or so, you kind of control themselves. It's good to remember those things, and it really helps your personality. It really grows into those characteristics that eventually can lead to leadership. So for me, that's really what I've seen, and I see that correlation completely when I'm hearing this.
The latest question.
Okay, how do these tribes relate to the east, west, north, and south?
This was my own
Which one?
invention, so I have no source for this. This came straight out of my head.
Yeah, but with the one that you had, or the diagram you have, the tabernacle with the 4 tribes and the ones that were leading each of those areas.
So I needed to display this correlation that I thought of in a way that was appropriate for an open meeting, right? I think that the brothers here would look at this slide and understand if they're paying attention.
Yeah.
What,
Okay.
right?
But we as non-Masons are not allowed to hear this, or you're gonna have to kill us.
I'm trying to be really strict. I think I even pushed it with this a little
Okay.
bit. But yeah, I wouldn't say anything further. The clues are there. And I think, worship philosophy said it best, that there's a progressive lesson through each chair, and these are the 4 most senior.
And actually, each chair has a duty in the lodge, which does not have to do too much with masonry, but just kind of the actual process of having an organization. And you can apply those lessons there by looking at the duties of each one of the chairs and being able to translate these lessons into their duties. I guess that's a way to put it.
Well, first of all, it's good that Masonry is not such a egalitarian society. We can say ladies first. This is nice. Well, can you please go back to that circle? The other can. Yeah. Well, when Worship Master Oscar asked about, what would the Mason said, I was not sure if I could say what I'm going to say, so I had to Google to see if I could write it. So I'd say that basically those 4 is just learn to subdue my passions and improve myself in Masonry. Because, in 2 terms, you can sum up all the 4 of them. It's not only Masonry, it's in life. That with 2 of them. Okay? Yes. Let's start.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Masons supposed to be the builders? Levites were the builders. Is that?
Yep.
No. Didn't they build the temple?
Well, so it was Levites assembling the tabernacle, right? The mobile temple in the desert. King Solomon's temple was actually a combination of Israelites and non-Israelites, workers from Syria, from Tyre. Phoenicia, really. Yeah, Phoenicians came down. So, and actually, that's even more emblematic of Masonry today, because Masonry is a whole hodgepodge of different people from all over. So, actually, King Solomon's temple was built by Israelites and non-Israelite Masons.
So if they were the builders and the protectorate was all of the tribes other than the Levites who were in the middle, who were the builders, and the tabernacle, which are the 10 Commandments. The Masons are built on that kind of a formula, as well as a protector formula, a builder formula.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so builder for sure. It's a big part of what our symbolism entitles, and protection as well. During our closed meetings, there's a guy standing outside with a sword. So it's both. Yeah.
Well, Masonry is parallelism with the building of the temple.
The Masons are the builders of the temple. That's why you have the apprentice, the telegraph, and the master masons. Same thing you had when you were building the temple. And each one has their own role in the building of the temple. And this is a parallelism between the building of the temple and being a mason. And we have come from being practicantes, constructores, builders, operative to speculative, as builders of our interior temple. We don't build temples anymore. But the Masons in Europe were the builders of the cathedrals, the great cathedrals. Don't forget that at that time, knowledge was reserved for a few ones. Mathematics was not known by anybody. Architecture was not known by anybody. Physics was not known by anybody. So those were the secrets the builders had, and they have to keep their secrets. And each group, the apprentice and the fellow craft and the masters, have their own secrets or their own knowledge that they cannot be shared. The apprentice cannot know what the fellow craft know, and they cannot know what the master know. So they went, on all these steps, knowing the secret. That's why the secrets of the Masons are, this is a whole, how can you say? Exaggeration, that we have a secret. There is no secret. The knowledge is not a secret right now. Everybody, knowledge is here right now. You can have it in your cellar, you can know anything, you can find everything. But at that time, that was not that easy. So the knowledge was a real secret that the Masons had. And right now, the only secrets we have is the words we use and the ways we recognize ourselves. And again, for the non-Masons, this is the idea that the Masons are against the church or against religion, and it cannot be anything more opposite than that. I mean, we are based on the Judeo-Christian tradition, and the belief of God is the cornerstone of Masonry. You cannot be a Mason if you don't believe in God. Now, how you call that God, that's your election. And if you are a Christian, you're a Muslim, you're Jewish, or you are a Hindu, or you can have any religion you want. But what Masons practice is there's one God, one great architect of the universe that has presented himself to different cultures, different groups of people in different ways. But it is one God. So Masons we don't preach on one true religion, but we preach on one true God.
So the Masons are able to build on the infrastructure of the country that they're in, including political infrastructure.
That's not a mission, but that's a consequence of being a Mason. Masonry is not a reformatory. To be a Mason, you have to be. We say that we take good men to make them a better man. We don't take bad people to make them good people. Masonry is not a reformatory. This is we want good people to come in to be better men. And of course, if you're a better man, you learn leadership, you're gonna become a leader in your field. If you're a doctor, if you're an engineer, even if you're a politician, or if you are a musician, whatever you are, you should become a leader in your field.
We do have one comment and one question. On anyone?
Yep. Just to add on to what you said, Masonry, back in ancient times when we were building the temple, right? When the work was done, right, the Masons would sleep outside and they had their families. So think about sons, daughters, wives, everything there. So when we talk about harmony, it really comes from that time because you don't want to live next to, potential thieves, rapists, whatever there is. So there was that common understanding that they would protect each other. They would also protect their family members and such. Now, as you mentioned, you traveled and built monasteries. It's because when they were done with one project, right? They had to travel all over for the next project. Where is it? Oh, I heard the king of North is going to be building a cathedral. So they would go over there. So when you ask about the handshakes, right? Those handshakes were earned by perfecting your craft and advancing to the next one. And when you went to another place, remember at that time, there's no scan, there's no phone, no photos, nothing. Right? So how can they recognize exactly? How do they know, hey, you're not an EA anymore, you're a photograph? These were some of the ways they did it. So when it goes back to saying how they transfer all that knowledge over and meet new brothers and such, it really focused on that. But that's really where the harmony began, and we continue that tradition. No matter who it is, we come with the understanding and protect each other, and help each other, stay with their wives, family members, and such.
I'm just very quick. We have actually Masons right here from other lodges, other places. That recognize our brother there is the country is from Ecuador. We take them as Master Mason because we are able to recognize. You had a question?
One question, I would like to wish for Mr. correlation about what the brother Ruben presented. That's, I love when you showed the 12 pictures of the 12 tribals. You talked about each one had a specific characteristic. So qualities of each one and the problems each one had. And it's when the Washman Master talked about asking us about the correlation. First thing what came to my mind is, look to us here. We are tribals. I came from Brazil. I have from Venezuela, Colombia. That showed me something so strong. That's that I, as a tribe of Brazil, I cannot construct or protect the temple. I need my brothers. I need the movers beside me. No, and that is something so beautiful in this message from me. Is that I cannot do this alone. And as Mason and as society, we need to be together as each one, independently of our culture, our mother culture, or our religion. We need to be together and do something in common to grow together. And yeah, that's the message and correlation I really do regarding translation. Thank you for the presentation.
And that applies regardless nationality or background. Even here in the United States, we need help with each other to build something. Any last comments?
No, I think I talked enough.
Well, please allow me to hopefully.
No, I just said we talk a lot and good.
Thank you. Please allow me to congratulate you. Even better when you leave a seat in your head to take home and do your own research and try to learn a little bit more. And this is purpose. So, do you have any good resources to go and look at afterwards?
The Bible, and I would say, really, it's the Bible, reading through it, and that's the source for pretty much all of us. Go to your Bible.
And thank you all for coming. I guess we can hang around downstairs, talk a little bit more. If you have any more questions, please go to the source directly or to any of us that can answer any question. Thank you so much for coming.
Where did you go? So many. We normally don't hear in American I understand.
I actually, I would allow.
I can't read an Israeli newspaper. Religious sense. Very good. Thank you.
Basically, we'll probably not add anything for that.